The envelope was red. Not the kind of red you see on Valentine's Day cards or Christmas wrapping paper. This was the red of warning labels, emergency signs, and final notices. The kind of red that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. Sarah Mitchell stared at it on her kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as morning light filtered through the blinds of her small two-bedroom apartment. The envelope had been there since yesterday afternoon, delivered by a process server who knocked 3 times before sliding it under her door. She hadn't opened it yet. She already knew what it said. But here's what you need to understand about Sarah Mitchell. She wasn't irresponsible. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't addicted to anything except perhaps her prayer life. In fact, if you asked anyone at Cornerstone Community Church, they would tell you Sarah was one of the most faithful prayer warriors they'd ever known. Every Tuesday morning prayer meeting, every Thursday night intercession session, every emergency prayer chain text message at 2 in the morning, Sarah was there. On her knees. Faithful. Devoted. Absolutely convinced that God would come through. She just had one problem. She had forgotten how to use her brain. Now, before you judge her too quickly, let me take you back. Because Sarah's story doesn't start with an eviction notice. It starts 18 months earlier, in a moment that would reshape everything she believed about faith, work, and what it means to trust God. 18 months ago, Sarah Mitchell had a job. Not a glamorous job. Not a career she dreamed about as a little girl. But a steady job as an administrative assistant at Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm in downtown Austin, Texas. She made $42,000 a year, had health insurance, and could pay her bills with a little left over for her daughter Emma's gymnastics classes. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Then came the merger. Henderson & Associates was acquired by a larger firm out of Dallas, and suddenly half the staff was deemed redundant. Sarah's position was eliminated on a Thursday afternoon in March. Her supervisor, Karen, had tears in her eyes as she handed Sarah the severance package. 3-month salary, a glowing recommendation letter, and a standard corporate speech about restructuring and new directions. Sarah was devastated. She went home that evening, sat Emma down at their small kitchen table, and told her 8-year-old daughter that Mommy wouldn't be working at the office anymore. Emma, resilient as children often are, simply asked if this meant they could have more movie nights together. That weekend, Sarah did what she had been taught to do her entire Christian life. She prayed. She got on her knees in her bedroom, opened her Bible to Philippians chapter 4, verse 19, and claimed the promise, "And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus." She prayed with faith. She prayed with conviction. She prayed like a woman who truly believed that God would move mountains on her behalf. And then she made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her entire life. She decided to wait on God. Not wait as in trust God while I take action. Not wait as in pray for wisdom while I update my resume. No, Sarah decided to wait in the way she had heard preached from pulpits her entire life. The kind of waiting that meant doing nothing but praying until God sovereignly intervened and dropped the perfect job in her lap. She heard Pastor Mike say it just that Sunday. Sometimes God wants us to be still and know that he is God. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is absolutely nothing except trust. So that's exactly what Sarah did. Nothing. The first month was actually peaceful. Sarah had her severance pay deposited into her checking account. She had time to spend with Emma, taking her to the park after school, helping with homework without the stress of rushing through dinner to make it to a work event. She attended every single prayer meeting at church. She increased her Bible reading time to 2 hours each morning. Her friend Jessica from church asked her one Tuesday morning, "Hey Sarah, have you started applying for jobs yet?" Sarah smiled serenely and replied, "I'm waiting on the Lord. I'm trusting him to open the right door at the right time. I don't want to run ahead of God's plan." Jessica nodded approvingly. "That's beautiful faith, girl. I'll be praying with you." And she meant it. Because in the Christian circles Sarah moved in, this kind of language was not only accepted, it was celebrated. Waiting on God, trusting his timing, not leaning on your own understanding. These were badges of spiritual maturity. No one asked the obvious question, did God give you a brain to use or just a mouth to pray with? Sarah spent her days in what she believed was deep spiritual warfare. She would wake up at 5:30 in the morning, make herself a cup of coffee, and spend the next 2 hours reading her Bible, journaling, and praying through various prayer lists. She had a notebook filled with scripture promises about provision, favor, and God's faithfulness. She highlighted verses in yellow. She wrote them on index cards and taped them to her bathroom mirror. She listened to worship music while she cleaned the apartment, declaring prophetic prayers over her financial situation. "You are Jehovah Jireh, my provider," she would say aloud while washing dishes. "You own the cattle on 1,000 hills. You will supply all my needs." And she believed it, completely, with zero doubt. But here's what Sarah wasn't doing. She wasn't updating her resume. She wasn't networking with former colleagues. She wasn't checking job boards. She wasn't applying to positions. She wasn't even telling people she was looking for work. Because in her mind, all of that would be striving in the flesh. That would be trusting in her own strength instead of trusting in God. She had heard too many sermons about how God wanted to be her source, not a job. How he could do exceedingly, abundantly above all we could ask or think. So she waited, and God, apparently, was taking his time. By the second month, the severance pay was running low. Sarah's checking account, which had felt comfortable at $8,000 after the severance deposit, was now down to $4,200. Rent was $1,200. Utilities were another $200. Groceries, gas, Emma's gymnastics, car insurance, phone bill, it all added up faster than she expected. One evening, as Sarah was making spaghetti for dinner, Emma asked her a simple question. "Mommy, when are you going back to work?" Sarah stirred the pasta, choosing her words carefully. "Well, sweetie, Mommy is waiting for God to show her the right job. We're trusting him." Emma, with the brutal honesty of an 8-year-old, said, "But my friend Kayla's mom got a new job really fast. She just looked on her computer and found one." Sarah felt a small prick of defensiveness. "Well, everyone's journey is different, honey. God has a special plan for us." Emma shrugged and went back to coloring at the kitchen table. But the question lodged itself in Sarah's mind like a splinter. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Sarah sat on her couch with her laptop. She opened it and stared at the screen. She could go to Indeed.com right now. She could update her LinkedIn profile. She could send out 5 applications before midnight. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she heard that voice, that spiritual voice she had learned to trust, the one that sounded righteous and holy and deeply committed to God's will. Asterisk, this is a test of your faith. God wants to see if you'll trust him completely or if you'll panic and take matters into your own hands. Don't you remember what happened to Abraham when he tried to help God's promise along? He ended up with Ishmael. Wait on God. He's going to come through for you in a way that will blow your mind. Everyone will know it was him and not you. Asterisk. Sarah closed the laptop. She got on her knees and prayed for another hour, asking God to strengthen her faith, to help her resist the temptation to strive, to give her peace in the waiting. She went to bed that night feeling spiritually victorious. Her bank account said otherwise. By month 3, people at church started noticing. Sarah's friend Jessica pulled her aside after the Tuesday morning prayer meeting. They stood in the church parking lot, the Texas sun already beating down at 9:30 in the morning. "Hey, how's the job search going?" Jessica asked, genuine concern in her eyes. Sarah smiled that same serene smile. "I'm still waiting on the Lord. I know he's going to do something amazing." Jessica hesitated. "That's great, Sarah. But, are you also, applying for things? Networking? My husband knows some people at." "I appreciate that," Sarah interrupted gently. "But I really feel like God is asking me to trust him completely right now. I don't want to get ahead of his timing." Jessica looked like she wanted to say more, but nodded slowly instead. "Okay, well, if you need anything, let me know." What Jessica didn't say, but what Sarah could see in her eyes, was the question, asterisk, are you sure this is faith and not just fear disguised as spirituality? Asterisk. But Sarah pushed that thought away. The truth was, Sarah wasn't just spiritually committed to waiting. She was terrified of looking for a job. The job market felt overwhelming. There were so many positions, So many requirements, so many rejection emails she might receive. What if she applied to 50 jobs and heard nothing back? What if she went to interviews and they chose someone younger, someone more qualified? It was easier to spiritualize her fear than to face it. So she called it faith. She called it trust. She called it waiting on God. But deep down, in a place she wouldn't admit even to herself, she was simply paralyzed. Month 4 brought the first major financial crisis. Sarah's checking account was down to $1,400. Rent was due in 3 days, which would bring her down to $200. She had maxed out the small credit card she had kept for emergencies, putting groceries and gas on it for the past 6 weeks. She sat at her kitchen table one morning, her bank statement open on her laptop, doing the math that wouldn't work no matter how many times she rearranged the numbers. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. Then her phone rang. It was her mother, calling from Virginia. "Hi, sweetie." Her mom's voice was warm. "Just checking in. How are things?" Sarah could have told the truth. She could have said, "Mom, I'm almost out of money. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do." Instead, she said, "Things are good, Mom. Just trusting God for the next step." There was a pause on the other end. "Sarah, honey, I've been praying for you. And I had a thought. Have you considered applying for some positions? Even if they're not perfect, just to have some income while you wait for the right opportunity." Sarah felt that familiar defensive wall go up. "Mom, I know you mean well, but I really feel like God is asking me to trust Him in a radical way right now. I don't want to settle for just anything when He has something specific for me." Her mother sighed. "Okay, sweetheart, but promise me if things get really tight, you'll let me know. Your father and I can help." "I promise," Sarah said, "but I won't need it. God's going to come through." She said it with such conviction that even she almost believed it. After hanging up, Sarah went to her bedroom and pulled out her prayer journal. She wrote in large letters, "God, I'm trusting you. Show up big. Show everyone that you are faithful." Then she spent the next 2 hours in prayer, spiritual warfare music playing softly in the background, declaring that breakthrough was coming, that provision was on its way, that she would not be put to shame. But here's the thing about spiritual-sounding prayers when you're refusing to take basic action. They start to sound less like faith and more like magical incantations, as if saying the right words, praying the right prayers, and believing hard enough would force God's hand while you did absolutely nothing practical. Sarah was treating God like a cosmic vending machine. Insert enough faith, press the prayer button, and out comes a miracle. That's not how God works. But Sarah didn't know that yet. Month 5 was when the church community stepped in. Not with tough love, not with accountability, but with the kind of enabling that would keep Sarah trapped in her spiritual delusion for several more months. It started when Pastor Mike announced during Sunday service that the church had a benevolence fund for members experiencing financial hardship. Sarah, sitting in the third row with Emma beside her, felt a mixture of relief and shame wash over her. After the service, she approached one of the deacons and quietly explained her situation. Within 2 days, the church had approved $1,500 to help with her rent and utilities. Sarah was overwhelmed with gratitude. She sent a text to the church's prayer chain. "God is so faithful. He provided through His people. This is confirmation that I'm on the right path. Keep trusting Him." The prayer chain responded with dozens of "Amen" and "Praise God" messages. Jessica sent her a private text. "So happy for you. But Sarah, do you think maybe God is also opening a door for you to take some action while He provides?" Sarah didn't respond to that text. Instead, she responded to the ones that reinforced her narrative. The ones that called her a woman of faith. The ones that said God is testing you and you're passing. The ones that quoted scriptures about how God provides for the birds of the air and clothes the lilies of the field. No one said what needed to be said. "Sarah, God also gave birds wings to fly and gather food. He gave lilies roots to draw nutrients from the soil." Provision and action aren't opposites. They work together. But that kind of truth wasn't popular. It wasn't comfortable. It didn't fit the "God will do it all for you if you just believe hard enough" theology that dominated Sarah's church culture. So Sarah took the $1,500, paid her rent, bought groceries, and went right back to her routine of praying 6 hours a day and applying for 0 jobs. She truly believed she was honoring God. She truly believed this was radical faith. She truly believed that any day now, God would supernaturally open a door and she'd have a job that paid better than her old one, with better hours, closer to home, and with a Christian boss who valued her spirituality. Any day now, any day. By month 6, the cognitive dissonance was becoming harder to ignore. Sarah would sit in church on Sunday mornings and hear sermons about being faithful in the little things and working heartily as for the Lord. She would hear verses like Proverbs 21 verse 5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Diligent. That word would stick in her mind. Then she'd hear other sermons about resting in God and not striving in your own strength and letting go and letting God. And she'd feel spiritually justified again. The problem was she was picking and choosing which biblical truths to apply based on which ones made her feel better about her inaction. One Thursday evening, Emma came home from school with a form. It was for a field trip to the zoo, $35 per student. "Mom, can I go? Everyone's going." Emma's eyes were bright with excitement. Sarah looked at the form, then at her bank account on her phone. She had $327 until the next church benevolence check, which she'd already requested and felt guilty about. "Let me pray about it, sweetie," Sarah said automatically. Emma's face fell. "Why do you have to pray about everything?" Kayla's mom just said yes right away. "Well, we're different," Sarah said, a little more sharply than she intended. "We trust God for everything." "But it's just $35, Emma said quietly. "Couldn't you just get a job like other moms?" The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest, not at Emma, but at the situation, at herself, at the question that was becoming harder to spiritualize away. "Go to your room," Sarah said. "I need to pray." Emma, tears forming in her eyes, walked slowly to her bedroom and closed the door. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, put her head in her hands, and for the first time in 6 months, asked herself the question she'd been avoiding. What if I'm wrong? The thought was terrifying, because if she was wrong, that meant 6 months of faith had actually been 6 months of foolishness. That meant all those prayer meetings, all those declarations, all those scriptures she'd claimed, none of it was real faith. It was just spiritual-sounding fear. She pushed the thought away. She got on her knees and prayed, asking God to forgive her for doubting, asking him to strengthen her faith, asking him for a sign that she was on the right path. But the question remained, lurking in the back of her mind like a shadow she couldn't shake. What if faith without works really is dead? What if God has been waiting for her to use the brain he gave her? What if this whole time the door God wanted to open was the one she was supposed to walk through herself? Let's fast forward through months 7, 8, and 9 because they followed the same devastating pattern. Church benevolence fund. Guilt. Relief. Repeat. Small gift from concerned friend to church. Gratitude. Shame. Repeat. Credit cards maxed out. Minimum payments missed. Credit score plummeting. Panic. Prayer. Repeat. And through it all, Sarah maintained her image as a faithful prayer warrior. She showed up to every church event with a smile. She quoted scripture with confidence. She testified about God's faithfulness even as the walls were closing in, until the day the eviction notice arrived. Which brings us back to where we started. Sarah Mitchell, sitting at her kitchen table, staring at a red envelope she didn't need to open because she already knew what it said. 7 days. That's all she had left. 7 days to come up with $1,200 for current rent, plus $1,200 for the month she'd missed, plus late fees, plus court costs. The total was over $3,000. She had $47 in her checking account. The church benevolence fund was tapped out. The deacons had gently explained they couldn't keep supporting her indefinitely. They'd helped her for 9 months. Other families needed assistance too. Her credit cards were maxed. Her mother had helped twice already and made it clear she couldn't keep bailing her out. Emma was 9 years old now, and she'd stopped asking about field trips, birthday parties, or new shoes. She'd learned to expect the answer, "We can't afford it right now, but we're trusting God." Sarah picked up the red envelope with trembling hands. She opened it. 7 days. Sarah's chest tightened. Her breath came in short gasps. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how God worked. She had been faithful. She had prayed. She had believed. Where was the breakthrough? Where was the miracle? Where was the door God was supposed to open? She grabbed her phone and did what she'd done for the past 9 months whenever panic set in. She opened her Bible app and went to her favorite verses. She read them aloud, her voice shaking. And my God will supply every need. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But for the first time in 9 months, the words felt empty. They felt like wishes instead of truth. They felt like denial instead of faith. Sarah put her phone down and stared at the eviction notice. 7 days. In 7 days, she and Emma would be on the street. And suddenly, in that moment of absolute crisis, a thought broke through all the spiritual language, all the prayer warrior identity, all the waiting on God theology that had kept her paralyzed for 9 months. What if I've been waiting for God to do something He's been waiting for me to do? The thought was so clear, so sharp, so utterly obvious that Sarah actually laughed, a short, bitter sound that caught in her throat. 9 months. 9 months of faith that had led her to this moment. 9 months of prayer that had accomplished nothing except emptying her bank account and filling her with spiritual pride. 9 months of waiting for God to hand her a miracle when He had already given her everything she needed: a brain, skills, experience, and a laptop with internet access. Sarah looked at the eviction notice again. 7 days. Then she looked at her closed laptop on the table. For 9 months, that laptop had been nothing but a tool for reading Bible studies and watching Christian YouTube videos about faith and breakthrough. What if she actually opened it and used it for something practical? What if she stopped praying about a job and started applying for one? The thought felt simultaneously obvious and terrifying. Because if she took action now, wouldn't that mean she'd wasted 9 months? Wouldn't that mean her faith had been foolishness? Wouldn't that mean she'd been wrong this entire time? Sarah sat at that table for 20 minutes, staring at her laptop, wrestling with the most important decision of her life. Would she continue waiting for God to do everything? Or would she finally use the tools He'd already given her? Before you move on, pause here. If you've ever called fear faith, if you've ever waited on God while ignoring the tools He already gave you, if you've ever prayed instead of acted, hoping obedience could replace responsibility, this story is about you. Don't miss what happens when faith meets action. Like, subscribe, and stay with this story. Because the breakthrough doesn't come from waiting anymore. It comes from moving. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing cars dance across the walls of her bedroom. The eviction notice sat on her nightstand like a ticking time bomb. 7 days had become 6 days the moment midnight passed. 6 days until she and Emma would be homeless. At 5:30 in the morning, Sarah gave up on sleep. She made coffee with trembling hands, the last of the ground beans she'd been rationing for 2 weeks. As she waited for it to brew, she picked up her phone and stared at it. She could call her mother. Again. But her mother had already helped twice, and the last conversation had ended with thinly veiled frustration. Sarah, honey, at some point you have to help yourself. She could call Jessica, but Jessica had been asking uncomfortable questions lately, the kind that made Sarah's spiritual defenses rise up like walls. She could call Pastor Mike, but what would she say? I've been praying for 9 months, and God hasn't answered. That felt like admitting defeat, like confessing that her faith wasn't strong enough. Instead, Sarah did what she'd done every morning for 9 months. She opened her Bible. She turned to her favorite passages, the ones she'd highlighted and memorized and claimed as promises. Philippians 4:19, Matthew 6:25 through 34, Psalm 37:25. She read them aloud, her voice shaking. And my God will supply every need of yours according to His riches and glory in Christ Jesus. But as she spoke the words, something felt different this morning. The words didn't land with the same conviction. They felt hollow, empty, like she was reciting a script she no longer believed. Sarah closed the Bible and put her head in her hands. For the first time in 9 months, she allowed herself to think the thought she'd been desperately avoiding. What if I'd been wrong about everything? After Emma left for school, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her phone. She didn't open her Bible app. She didn't turn on worship music. She didn't kneel in prayer. Instead, she opened Google. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Then she typed, "How long does it take to find a job?" The search results loaded. Average job search takes 3 to 6 months. Most people find employment within 5 months of active searching. Tips for speeding up your job search: apply to 10 to 15 positions per week. Network actively. Follow up on applications. Sarah's stomach clenched. 3 to 6 months. 5 months of active searching. She had been unemployed for 9 months and had applied to exactly 0 positions. Her hands shook as she typed another search. How many job applications before getting hired? The results made her want to vomit. On average, it takes 100 to 200 applications to receive one job offer. Most successful job seekers apply to 2 to 3 positions per day. The key is consistency and volume. Don't get discouraged by rejection. 200 applications. Sarah had sent 0. She typed one more search, this time with tears starting to blur her vision. What happens after eviction? The results were brutal. Evictions stay on your record for 7 years. Future landlords will see the eviction and may deny your application. Eviction makes it extremely difficult to rent again. Many families end up in shelters or staying with relatives indefinitely. Sarah's phone slipped from her hands and clattered onto the table. 7 years. An eviction would follow her for 7 years. Every apartment application, every background check, every attempt to rebuild her life. The eviction would be there like a scarlet letter announcing her failure. And it was all because she had been too spiritual to open a laptop and apply for jobs. She had wasted 9 months waiting for a miracle when she should have been working toward a solution. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Sarah tried to pray. She really did. She got on her knees in the living room, clasped her hands together, and attempted to connect with God the way she had for 9 months. The familiar prayers, the declarations, the warfare language. But nothing came out. Her mind was too loud, too full of math. 6 days, $47, $3,000 owed, 200 job applications needed, 9 months wasted. She turned on worship music, hoping it would help. A song came on that she'd listened to hundreds of times over the past 9 months. The lyrics spoke of God's faithfulness, His provision, His promises that never fail. The chorus declared, "You've never failed me yet. I know you never will." Sarah listened to the words, and something inside her snapped. She grabbed her phone and paused the music. The silence was deafening. "But you have failed me," she whispered to the empty room. Or maybe I failed me. The thought was terrifying, blasphemous even. You weren't supposed to question God's faithfulness. You weren't supposed to doubt His promises. But Sarah couldn't deny what was staring her in the face. 9 months of faithful prayer had resulted in an eviction notice and $47. Either God had failed her, or she had completely misunderstood what faith was supposed to look like. She sat on the floor of her living room and let herself cry. Not the gentle, spiritual tears she'd cried during prayer meetings. These were raw, ugly sobs of grief and regret and rage at her own stupidity. How had she let it get this bad? How had she convinced herself that doing nothing was the same as trusting God? How had she spiritualized her fear into something that sounded like faith? Jessica showed up at Sarah's apartment unannounced on Tuesday morning. Sarah opened the door in her pajamas, hair unbrushed, eyes swollen from crying. Jessica took one look at her and pushed past into the apartment. "Okay," Jessica said, setting her designer handbag on the counter. "We're going to talk, and you're going to listen. No spiritual bypassing. No, I'm waiting on God nonsense. Real talk. Right now." Sarah's defenses immediately went up. "Jessica, I don't think." "Sarah." Jessica's voice was firm, but not unkind. "I love you. You're my sister in Christ. But I'm watching you drown while you refuse to grab the life preserver. So sit down." Sarah sat. Jessica pulled out a chair and sat across from her at the kitchen table. She noticed the eviction notice immediately. Is that what I think it is? Jessica asked quietly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Jessica picked up the notice and read it. Her jaw tightened. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. Sarah, this is day 5. You have 5 days to come up with $3,000 or you and Emma are on the street. Do you understand the severity of this situation? I've been praying, Sarah started. Stop. Jessica held up her hand. Just stop. I know you've been praying. I know you have faith. I know you believe God is going to come through. But Sarah, answer me honestly. Have you applied for a single job in the last 9 months? The question hung in the air. Sarah looked down at her hands. No, she whispered. Have you updated your resume? No. Have you networked with former colleagues? No. Have you even looked at job postings? No. Jessica leaned forward. Then what exactly have you been doing? Praying, reading my Bible, going to church, trusting God too. To do what, Sarah? Jessica's voice rose slightly. To magically deposit money in your account? To have an employer call you out of the blue for a job you never applied for? To make manna fall from heaven to pay your rent? Sarah felt anger flare. You don't understand. God has a specific plan. I understand perfectly. Jessica interrupted. I understand that you're using spirituality as an excuse to avoid facing your fear. I understand that you'd rather lose your apartment than risk getting rejected from job applications. I understand that you've confused faith with passivity. The words hit like slaps. That's not fair, Sarah said, tears starting again. You're right, it's not fair, Jessica said, her voice softening. It's not fair that you lost your job. It's not fair that you're struggling. It's not fair that you're scared. But Sarah, faith without works is dead. James chapter 2, verse 26. You know that verse. Sarah nodded miserably. Then why? Jessica said gently. Have you spent 9 months having faith without doing any work? Sarah had no answer. Jessica reached across the table and took Sarah's hands. I need you to hear me. God is not a cosmic vending machine. He doesn't reward passivity. He gave you a brain, skills, experience, and resources. He expects you to use them. Praying for a job while refusing to apply for jobs isn't faith, it's foolishness. But Pastor Mike said, I don't care what Pastor Mike said. Jessica cut in. Pastor Mike has a steady salary. Pastor Mike's not facing eviction. Pastor Mike can afford to preach about waiting on God because he's not waiting for anything. He already has what he needs. The truth of that statement settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. What do I do? Sarah asked, her voice small and broken. Jessica squeezed her hands. You open your laptop. Right now. Today. And you start applying for every single job you're qualified for. You don't wait for the perfect opportunity. You don't pray about whether it's God's will. You apply until someone says yes. But I only have 5 days, which is exactly why you need to start right now instead of 5 minutes from now. Sarah looked at her closed laptop on the counter. It sat there like an accusation. 9 months. She could have been applying for jobs 9 months ago. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. What if I apply and no one responds? What if I'm not good enough? What if? Then you'll know, Jessica said, and you'll keep trying. But at least you'll have tried. Right now, you're about to be evicted and you haven't even given yourself a chance. Jessica stood up and walked to the counter. She opened Sarah's laptop and set it on the table in front of her. I'm going to sit here with you, Jessica said, and we're going to update your resume together. Then we're going to apply to 10 jobs before I leave. And you're going to apply to 10 more after I'm gone. And tomorrow, you're going to apply to 20. And the next day, 30. Do you hear me? Sarah stared at the laptop screen. The homepage was still set to a Christian website with a daily devotional. I hear you, Sarah whispered. Opening her resume file felt like opening a time capsule. The last time Sarah had updated it was 18 months ago, right before she'd gotten the job at Henderson Associates. The job she'd lost 9 months ago. The job she hadn't replaced because she'd been too busy praying. Jessica pulled her chair close and looked at the screen. Okay, first things first. We need to add your most recent position and update your skills section. For the next hour, Jessica walked Sarah through updating every section. They added her administrative experience, highlighted her organizational skills, emphasized her proficiency with various software programs. Sarah had forgotten how competent she actually was. She had forgotten that she had skills, experience, value to offer an employer. 9 months of unemployment had convinced her she was worthless. 9 months of waiting on God had made her believe she had nothing to contribute. But as she looked at her updated resume, she saw it, a capable, experienced administrative professional with a solid work history. Someone who could be an asset to a company. Someone hireable. See, Jessica said, reading Sarah's expression, "You're not unemployable. You're actually pretty impressive. You just forgot." Sarah saved the document and stared at it. "Now what?" she asked. "Now we go to Indeed, LinkedIn, and Glassdoor," Jessica said, already opening new browser tabs. "And we start applying." Jessica searched Administrative Assistant Austin, Texas, and hit Enter. Hundreds of results populated the screen. Sarah felt overwhelmed immediately. There are so many. How do I know which ones to apply for? All of them, Jessica said simply. You apply for all of them. If you're qualified and they're hiring, you apply. You don't overthink it. You don't pray about each individual position. You just apply. They started with the first posting. Office manager at a dental practice. $40,000 a year. Benefits. Flexible hours. Jessica clicked Apply Now and helped Sarah fill out the application. Zosum upolat. Cover letter. Basic questions. 15 minutes later, Sarah clicked Submit Application. It was done. Her first job application in 9 months. Sarah expected to feel relief. Instead, she felt nauseated. "One down," Jessica said. 9 more before I leave." They worked through the list systematically. Medical office receptionist, executive assistant at a law firm, administrative coordinator at nonprofit, church secretary at a large congregation. Each application took 10 to 20 minutes. Each one felt simultaneously impossible and surprisingly straightforward. By the time Jessica had to leave for a meeting, Sarah had submitted 10 applications. 10 applications in 2 hours. She could have done this 9 months ago. She could have spent 15 hours a week applying for jobs while also praying. She could have trusted God while also using the brain He gave her. But she hadn't. And now she had 5 days to undo 9 months of inaction. After Jessica left, Sarah sat at her laptop and stared at the screen. Jessica had told her to apply to 10 more positions before Emma got home from school. That gave her 3 hours. Sarah opened a new Indeed search and scrolled through the listings. Then she stopped. She closed her eyes and did something she hadn't done in 9 months. She prayed differently. "God," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I thought I was trusting you, but I was really just hiding. I was scared and I made it sound spiritual. I need help, not a miracle. Just help me do what I should have been doing all along." It wasn't an eloquent prayer. It wasn't spiritual warfare. It wasn't claiming promises or declaring breakthrough. It was just honest. Sarah opened her eyes and got to work. Administrative assistant at a tech startup. Apply. Receptionist at a veterinary clinic. Apply. Office coordinator at a real estate company. Apply. She fell into a rhythm. Read the job description. Make sure she was qualified. Fill out the application. Submit. By the time Emma walked through the door at 3:15, Sarah had submitted 17 applications. 27 total for the day. 27 more than she'd submitted in the previous 9 months. "Mom," Emma called out, dropping her backpack by the door. "What are you doing?" Sarah looked up from her laptop, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel like a failure. "I'm applying for jobs, baby," Sarah said. "Like I should have been doing a long time ago." Emma's face lit up. "Really? Does that mean we can go to the zoo?" Sarah's heart clenched. The zoo field trip had been weeks ago. Emma hadn't gone. "Maybe not the zoo," Sarah said carefully. "But hopefully soon, we'll be able to do fun things again." Emma nodded and went to her room to start her homework. Sarah turned back to her laptop. For days left, she kept applying. At 7:30 that evening, Sarah's phone rang. It was the apartment complex management office. Sarah's hands shook as she answered. "Hello, Ms. Mitchell. This is David from Oakwood Apartments. I'm calling to confirm that you received the eviction notice and understand that payment in full is required by Saturday at 5 p.m. to avoid removal." Sarah's voice cracked. "Yes, I understand. The total amount owed is $3,214.73, including late fees and court costs. Can you confirm you'll have payment by Saturday? Sarah wanted to lie. She wanted to say yes, everything would be fine. She had it under control. Instead, she said, I'm working on it. There was a pause. Ms. Mitchell, I need to be clear. If payment is not received in full by Saturday at 5 p.m., the sheriff will arrive Monday morning at 8 a.m. to facilitate your removal from the property. All belongings not removed will be considered abandoned. Do you understand? Understand, Sarah whispered. I'm sorry, David said, and he actually sounded sincere. I hope you're able to work something out. He hung up. Sarah stood in her kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, and let the reality sink in. For days, 27 job applications weren't going to matter. Even if someone called her tomorrow for an interview, even if they hired her on the spot, she wouldn't get a paycheck in 4 days. She had been too late. 9 months too late. Sarah didn't cry. She didn't pray. She didn't open her Bible. She just stood there in her kitchen, paralyzed by the weight of her own choices. Emma appeared in the doorway. Mom, are you okay? Sarah looked at her daughter. 9 years old. Innocent. Trusting. About to lose her home because her mother had been too spiritual to be practical. Come here, baby, Sarah said. Emma walked over, and Sarah knelt down at her eye level. Emma, I need to tell you something important, Sarah began, her voice steady, even though her heart was breaking. We might have to leave this apartment soon, and I need you to know that it's not your fault. It's mine. Emma's eyes widened. Are we going to be homeless? The word hit Sarah like a punch. Homeless. Her daughter shouldn't even know that word applied to them. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen, Sarah said. But things are going to be hard for a little while. I made some mistakes, and now I have to fix them. What kind of mistakes? Emma asked. Sarah took a deep breath. I spent too much time praying and not enough time working. I thought God wanted me to wait for him to give me a job, but I think he wanted me to go look for one. And I didn't do that. So now we're in trouble. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that shattered Sarah's heart into pieces. Is God mad at us? No, baby, Sarah said quickly, pulling Emma into a hug. God's not mad at us. But I think I misunderstood what he wanted me to do. And that's on me, not you, and not him. Emma hugged her back tightly. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. After Emma went to bed, Sarah sat on her couch in the dark. Her laptop was open on the coffee table. The job search page was still up. She had 4 days. 4 days to somehow undo 9 months of spiritual delusion and financial catastrophe. 4 days to find $3,000. 4 days to prove that faith and action could somehow coexist. But how? Sarah woke up at 4 a.m. on Thursday morning. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the sheriff showing up at her door, boxes of her belongings on the lawn, Emma crying in the background. She made coffee and opened her laptop out of habit. Her email inbox loaded, and there, among the spam and promotional messages, was an email with the subject line, Interview Request, Office Manager Position. Sarah's heart stopped. She clicked on it with trembling fingers. Dear Ms. Mitchell, thank you for your application for the office manager position at Bright Smiles Dental. We were impressed with your resume and would like to invite you for an interview. Are you available tomorrow, Friday, at 10 a.m.? Please confirm at your earliest convenience. Best regards, Dr. Patricia Chun. Sarah read the email 3 times to make sure it was real. An interview request. Less than 24 hours after applying. She responded immediately. Yes, I'm available. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to meeting with you. She hit send and then sat back, her mind racing. Tomorrow. She had an interview tomorrow. But even if they hired her on the spot, which was unlikely, she wouldn't get a paycheck by Saturday. She wouldn't have $3,000 by 5 p.m. Still, it was something. It was hope. It was proof that action produced results faster than 9 months of prayer ever had. Sarah spent the rest of the morning preparing. She researched the dental practice. She reviewed common interview questions. She picked out her most professional outfit from the back of her closet, grateful she'd kept it even during the months when she never needed it. And she kept applying for more jobs. Because one interview wasn't enough. One possibility wasn't enough. She needed dozens of possibilities, hundreds even. By noon, she had submitted 40 more applications, 67 total in 2 days. Her phone rang. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was professional, female, slightly hurried. "Yes, this is Sarah," she said, her heart pounding. "Hi, Sarah. This is Amanda Rodriguez from Westside Medical Group. You applied for our medical receptionist position last night. I know this is short notice, but we just had someone quit unexpectedly, and we need to fill the position immediately. Could you possibly come in for an interview today? Like this afternoon?" Sarah's mind spun. "Yes, absolutely. What time? Would 2 p.m. work?" Sarah looked at the clock. It was 12:15. 2 p.m. is perfect. Great. Do you have our address? Sarah wrote it down, confirmed the details, and hung up. 2 interviews. In less than 24 hours of actually trying, she had 2 interviews. 9 months of prayer had produced nothing. 2 days of action had produced 2 opportunities. The irony was almost painful. Sarah got ready quickly, her hands shaking as she applied makeup, brushed her hair, put on her professional clothes. She hadn't dressed like this in 9 months. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like to look capable and put together. Before she left, she called Jessica. "I have 2 interviews," Sarah said as soon as Jessica answered. "One today at 2, another tomorrow at 10. There was a pause, and then Jessica let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Sarah, oh my gosh. See what happens when you actually try." "I know," Sarah said. "I should have done this 9 months ago." "Don't think about that right now," Jessica said firmly. "Just focus on these interviews. You're going to do amazing. Call me after, okay?" "I will." "And Jessica, thank you for pushing me, for not letting me hide behind fake spirituality. That's what real friends do," Jessica said. "Now go get that job." The interview at Westside Medical Group went okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. Amanda, the office manager, was friendly but rushed. The position paid $38,000, less than her old job. The hours were long. The office was understaffed, which was why they needed someone immediately. Sarah answered questions about her experience, her organizational skills, her ability to handle difficult patients. She thought she did reasonably well, but it was hard to tell. At the end, Amanda said, "We're interviewing 2 other candidates today. We'll make a decision by tomorrow morning and let you know either way." Sarah thanked her and left. As she drove home, she felt a strange mixture of hope and despair. Maybe she'd get the job. Maybe she wouldn't. But even if she did, it wouldn't save her apartment. 3 days wasn't enough time to get hired, start work, and receive a paycheck. The math just didn't work. When she got home, Emma was at a friend's house for a play date. Sarah sat at her kitchen table and looked at the eviction notice. 3 days left. She had done everything Jessica told her to do. She had applied for jobs. She had gone to interviews. She had taken action instead of just praying. But it was too late. 9 months of inaction couldn't be fixed in 3 days. Sarah put her head down on the table and finally let herself feel the full weight of her failure. That evening, Sarah did something she should have done 9 months ago. She called her mother and told her the truth. All of it. The eviction notice. The $3,000 owed. The 9 months of unemployment spent praying instead of applying. The 2 interviews that came too late to matter. Her mother listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, her mother said, "Sarah, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay," Sarah said. "During these 9 months, did you ever feel in your spirit that God was telling you not to apply for jobs? Did you have a clear, unmistakable leading that you were supposed to just pray and wait?" Sarah thought about it, really thought about it. "No," she admitted. "I never felt God tell me not to look for work. I was scared, and it was easier to call it faith than to admit I was afraid of rejection." Her mother sighed. "That's what I thought. Sarah, God gave you a brain. He gave you skills. He gave you the internet and job boards and connections. He gave you everything you needed to find work. But he's not going to force you to use those gifts. That's on you." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I know that now. Your father and I will send you $1,500, her mother said. "It's not the full amount, but but it's what we can afford. You'll need to figure out the other half yourself. Sarah started crying. Mom, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. But Sarah, this is the last time. After this, you're on your own. Not because we don't love you, but because you need to learn that God helps those who help themselves. Do you understand? Understand, Sarah said through tears. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I know you are. Now, go make something happen. You have 3 days. After they hung up, Sarah sat with her phone in her hand. $1,500 from her parents. She still needed another $1,500. 3 days to find it. Sarah opened her laptop and kept applying. Because at this point, what else could she do? Sarah hit submit for the last time at 2:17 a.m. The eviction deadline was 48 hours away. No savings, no backup plan, no guarantees, just silence. And then her phone buzzed, not with an answer, but with a question that could cost her everything. And Sarah must decide if obedience is still worth it, when the outcome isn't promised. Stay with this story, subscribe, and like to avoid missing out. Sarah woke up at 6 a.m. on Friday morning with her stomach in knots. Today was the interview at Bright Smiles Dental. 10 a.m. Dr. Patricia Chun. She also still hadn't heard back from Westside Medical Group about yesterday's interview. And she had 3 days, well, technically 2.5 days, to come up with $1,500. Her mother's money had been deposited overnight. Sarah checked her bank account. $1,547. Enough for rent, but not enough for rent plus the late fees and court costs. She needed exactly $1,567 more by tomorrow at 5 p.m. Sarah made coffee and sat at her laptop. Before she did anything else, she checked her email. Nothing from Westside Medical. But there were 3 more interview requests from positions she'd applied to 2 days ago. 3 more opportunities. All of them scheduled for next week. Next week, after the eviction, after the sheriff came, after she'd already lost everything. Sarah felt the familiar despair rising, but pushed it down. She'd spent 9 months drowning in despair disguised as faith. She couldn't afford to go back there now. She got dressed in her interview outfit. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. For 9 months, she'd looked like defeat. Messy hair, sweatpants, dark circles, the uniform of someone who'd given up. But today, dressed professionally, hair-styled, minimal makeup carefully applied, she looked like someone who was trying. Someone who hadn't completely given up. Emma knocked on the bathroom door. Mom, you look really pretty. Sarah opened the door and smiled at her daughter. Thank you, baby. I have another interview this morning. Are you going to get the job? Emma asked with the hopeful innocence only children possess. I don't know, Sarah said honestly, but I'm going to try my best. Emma hugged her. I'm praying for you. The words hit Sarah differently than they would have a week ago. Prayer wasn't bad. Prayer wasn't wrong. Prayer just wasn't supposed to be a substitute for action. Thank you, sweetheart, Sarah said. That means a lot. Bright Smiles Dental was located in a modern building in a nice part of Austin. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, checked her reflection in her car mirror one last time, and walked in. The waiting room was clean, contemporary, with soft music playing and the faint smell of mint in the air. A young receptionist greeted her warmly. You must be Sarah? Dr. Chun is expecting you. Can I get you some water or coffee? Water would be great. Thank you, Sarah said, her throat suddenly dry. 5 minutes later, Dr. Patricia Chun appeared. She was in her mid-40s, Asian American, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and an air of competent efficiency. Sarah, so nice to meet you. Come on back to my office. They walked through the dental practice, bright, well-organized, staff members greeting Dr. Chun warmly as they passed. This was a good practice, a healthy workplace. In her office, Dr. Chun gestured to a comfortable chair. So, I've reviewed your resume, and I'm impressed. Tell me about your experience at Henderson & Associates. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah talked about her work history, her organizational skills, her ability to manage schedules and handle multiple priorities. She talked about her proficiency with dental software. She'd worked briefly at a dental office years ago during college. Dr. Chun nodded throughout, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. Then she asked the question Sarah had been dreading. I noticed there's a 9-month gap in your employment. Can you tell me about that? Sarah took a breath. She could lie. She could make excuses. Instead, she chose honesty. I was let go when my previous employer merged with another company, Sarah began. And I'll be honest with you, Dr. Chun, I made a mistake. I spent those 9 months praying for a job instead of actively looking for one. I confused faith with passivity. I thought God would just hand me something without me doing the work. Dr. Chin's eyebrows raised slightly. That's remarkably honest. I learned a hard lesson, Sarah continued. I learned that God gives us abilities and expects us to use them. I learned that faith without action is worthless. And I learned it the hard way. I'm actually facing eviction this weekend because I waited too long to start job hunting. Sarah hadn't planned to say that last part. It just came out. Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment, studying Sarah's face. I appreciate your transparency, she finally said. A lot of candidates would have fabricated a story or blamed external circumstances. The fact that you're taking responsibility for your choices tells me something about your character. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Dr. Chun leaned forward. Here's my situation. My office manager of 8 years just gave her 2 weeks' notice. Her last day is next Friday. I need someone who can start immediately, learn quickly, and handle a fast-paced environment. The position pays $42,000 annually, full benefits, and includes dental coverage for you and her daughter. $42,000, the same as her old job. The challenge, Dr. Chun continued, is that I need someone reliable. Someone who's going to show up, do the work, and not disappear when things get hard. Can you be that person? Sarah met her eyes directly. Yes, absolutely yes. I've learned my lesson about passivity. I won't make that mistake again. Dr. Chin smiled. Good. I'd like to offer you the position, pending reference checks. Can you start a week from Monday? Sarah's heart soared. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. They discussed logistics, start date, paperwork, training schedule. Sarah signed initial documents and left the office 45 minutes later with a job. An actual job. After 9 months, she finally had employment. But as she sat in her car in the parking lot, reality crashed back down. She had a job starting in 10 days. But the eviction was tomorrow. She had $1,500. She needed $3,000. Having a job next week didn't help her this week. Sarah's phone rang as she was driving home. Ms. Mitchell? This is Amanda from Westside Medical Group. I want to let you know that we've decided to offer you the medical receptionist position. Can you start Monday? Sarah nearly swerved. 2 job offers in 1 day. After 9 months of nothing, she suddenly had 2 offers. Amanda, thank you so much, Sarah said, pulling over to take the call properly. I actually just accepted another position this morning, but I really appreciate you considering me. Oh, that's wonderful. Amanda sounded genuinely happy for her. I'm glad it worked out for you. Best of luck. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her parked car and laughed. It was the kind of laughter that borders on hysteria. The kind that comes when a universe's timing is so absurd you can't process it any other way. 2 job offers, 9 months of unemployment, and suddenly she had 2 offers in 1 day. If she had started applying 9 months ago, she would have had a job within weeks. She would have never missed rent, never faced eviction, never put Emma through this trauma. All of this suffering had been completely, utterly unnecessary. The realization was devastating and liberating at the same time. Sarah wiped her eyes and started driving home. She had a job. That was huge. That was life-changing. But she still had 24 hours to come up with $1,500 or lose her home. When Sarah got home, Emma was at school and she had the apartment to herself. She sat at her kitchen table and made a list. Money I have, $1, $5.47. Money I need by tomorrow, 5 p.m. $3, $214.73. Gap, $1, $667.73. She looked at the list and thought through every possible option. Option 1, ask Jessica for money. Jessica had already done so much. She'd spent hours helping with the resume, pushing Sarah to take action, being the voice of truth when everyone else enabled spiritual passivity. Asking for money felt like too much. But Sarah swallowed her pride and sent a text. I got the job at the dental office, starting in 10 days. But I'm still $1,668 short for tomorrow. I know this is a huge ask, but is there any way you could loan me that amount? I'll pay you back as soon as I get my first paycheck. Jessica responded within minutes. Oh, Sarah, I'm so proud of you for getting the job. But my husband and I are completely tapped out right now. We just paid for his mom's medical bills. I wish I could help. Have you tried calling the apartment management to see if they'll give you an extension now that you have a job offer? Sarah's heart sank, but she understood. Thanks anyway. You've already helped me more than you know. Option 2, call the apartment management. Sarah dialed the number, her hands shaking. Oakwood Apartments, this is David speaking. Hi, David. This is Sarah Mitchell in Unit 237. I want to let you know that I just got a job offer today. I start in 10 days. Is there any way the management company would consider an extension on the payment deadline, given that I'll have income coming very soon? David sighed. Ms. Mitchell, I'm glad you got a job. Truly. But the eviction process has already gone through the courts. The deadline is a court-ordered deadline, not something we can extend. If you don't have the full payment by tomorrow at 5 p.m., the eviction proceeds. Is there anyone else I could talk to? A manager or... I'm a manager, ma'am, and I've already presented your case to the property owner. The answer is no. I am sorry. Sarah thanked him and hung up. Option 3. Sell something. Sarah looked around her apartment. What did she own that was worth $1,600? Her car was 12 years old and barely running. Maybe worth $3,000, but she needed it to get to her new job. Her furniture was mostly secondhand. Her laptop was old. She had no jewelry except her wedding ring, and she couldn't bring herself to sell that. She had nothing of value. Option 4. Ask the church. Sarah called the church office. Pastor Mike's secretary answered. Hi, this is Sarah Mitchell. I was wondering if I could speak with Pastor Mike about the benevolence fund. It's urgent. Oh, Sarah, Pastor Mike is out of town at a conference until Monday. But the benevolence committee just met yesterday, and unfortunately, the fund is depleted for this month. Several families needed assistance with medical bills. I'm so sorry. Sarah felt the walls closing in. One more option. The option she'd been avoiding. Sarah scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. Karen, her former supervisor from Henderson and Associates. The woman who had laid her off 18 months ago with tears in her eyes and a glowing recommendation letter. Sarah hadn't spoken to Karen since that day. Hadn't reached out, hadn't networked, hadn't done any of the things an intelligent job seeker should do. She just prayed. Now she was about to ask Karen for money. The humiliation was almost unbearable. But Emma's face flashed in her mind. Emma, who was 9 years old and about to be homeless because her mother had been too proud and too spiritual to be practical. Sarah hit call. Karen answered on the third ring. Sarah? Oh my goodness, Sarah Mitchell. How are you? I've been thinking about you. Hi, Karen, Sarah said, her voice already shaking. I'm not doing well, actually, and I need to ask you something that's going to sound absolutely crazy. What's wrong? Karen's voice immediately shifted to concern. Sarah took a deep breath and told her everything. The unemployment, the 9 months of waiting on God, the eviction notice, the job offer that came too late, the $1,500 she still needed by tomorrow. When she finished, there was silence on the other end. Sarah, Karen finally said, are you telling me you've been unemployed for 9 months and you never once reached out to me? Never asked if I knew of any openings? Never used me as a reference? I know, Sarah whispered. I know how stupid that sounds. I thought God would just handle it. I thought I was supposed to wait. I was wrong about everything. Karen sighed. Sarah, when I laid you off, I told you to call me anytime. I told you I would help you find something. Do you remember that? I remember. I had 3 colleagues ask me if I knew anyone looking for admin work. 3 opportunities one could have connected you with. But I never heard from you, so I assumed you'd found something. Sarah felt sick. 3 opportunities. She'd missed 3 opportunities because she'd been too busy praying to pick up the phone. I'm so sorry, Sarah said. I made terrible choices. And now I'm asking you to bail me out of a situation that's entirely my own fault. If you say no, I completely understand. There was a long pause. How much do you need? Karen asked. $1,667.73, Sarah said. But Karen, if you can only do part of it, anything helps. I just got a job offer today. I can pay you back in a month, maybe 2. Send me your Venmo, Karen interrupted. I'll send the full amount. Sarah started crying. Karen, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Consider a loan. Pay me back when you can. And Sarah? Yes. Promise me something. Promise me that when you start this new job, you'll actually build relationships. You'll network. You'll be smart about your career. Promise me you won't waste the gift you've been given by retreating into passivity again. I promise, Sarah said through tears. Isueri promisa. Good. Send me your Venmo. And Sarah, I'm proud of you for finally asking for help. That took guts. After they hung up, Sarah sat at her kitchen table and cried. Not tears of relief, though relief was there. These were tears of shame. Karen, the woman who had laid her off, had just saved her. A woman Sarah had never called, never networked with, never treated as anything more than a former boss. And she'd done it without judgment, without lecture, just grace. The kind of grace Sarah should have been showing herself 9 months ago instead of hiding behind spiritual language. At 4:30 p.m. on Friday, Sarah walked into the Oakwood Apartments management office with a cashier's check for $3,214.73. David looked up from his desk, clearly surprised to see her. Ms. Mitchell. Sarah placed the check on his desk. Full payment. As required. David looked at the check, then at Sarah, then back at the check. You actually got it. I got it, Sarah said. Can you please cancel the eviction? David started typing on his computer. Yes, absolutely. Let me process this and get you a receipt. He paused. Ms. Mitchell, can I ask, how did you pull this together? Sarah thought about the past 3 days. The 70 applications. The 2 job offers. Her mother's help. Jessica's tough love. Karen's grace. I stopped waiting for a miracle and started taking action, Sarah said simply. David nodded slowly. Good for you. A lot of people in your situation wouldn't have been able to turn around. He printed out a receipt and a document confirming the eviction was canceled. Sarah held the papers in her hands and felt the weight of the past 9 months finally lift. She wasn't going to be homeless. Emma wasn't going to lose her home. They were going to be okay. Not because God dropped money from heaven. Not because she prayed hard enough. But because she finally woke up and used the brain, the skills, and the connections God had already given her. That evening, Sarah made Emma's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. As they ate together at their small kitchen table, Sarah said, Emma, I have some good news. Emma looked up, tomato sauce on her chin. What? We get to stay in our apartment. I paid the rent. We're not moving. Emma's face lit up. Really? We get to stay? Really? Emma jumped out of her chair and hugged Sarah so hard she nearly knocked her over. I'm so happy. I didn't want to leave. Sarah held her daughter tight. I know, baby. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm sorry things got so bad. It's okay, Emma said. You fixed it. Sarah pulled back to look at her daughter's face. Emma, I want you to remember something important, okay? Okay. Prayer is good. Faith is good. Trusting God is good. But God also wants us to use our brains and take action. Do you understand? Sometimes we pray, and then we get up and do something about it. Emma nodded seriously, like when I pray about my math test, but I still have to study. Sarah laughed. Exactly like that. God helps us, but he expects us to do our part too. That makes sense, Emma said. Then she tilted her head. Mom, did you get a job? I did. I start in 10 days. Will we be able to go to the zoo? Sarah smiled. Yes, baby. We'll go to the zoo, and we'll do lots of other fun things too. Things are going to get better now. Emma went back to her spaghetti, satisfied. Sarah watched her daughter eat and felt a mixture of gratitude and regret, so intense it was almost physically painful. Gratitude that they'd made it through. Regret that it had taken hitting absolute rock bottom for her to wake up. Saturday morning, Sarah woke up early and did something she hadn't done in 3 days. She prayed. But it was different this time. She didn't kneel. She didn't open her Bible to claim promises. She didn't play worship music or light candles or create an atmosphere. She just sat on her couch with her coffee and talked to God honestly. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm sorry I blamed you for my own passivity. I'm sorry I used spirituality as an excuse to avoid facing my fears. I'm sorry I taught my daughter that prayer is a substitute for action instead of a companion to it. She paused, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was honoring you by waiting. But I think I was really just hiding. And I'm sorry. There was no audible voice. No warning buch. No supernatural sign. But Sarah felt something shift inside her. A quiet peace. A sense that God wasn't angry with her. He'd been waiting patiently for her to stop treating him like a cosmic vending machine and start treating him like a father who'd given her everything she needed to succeed, including a brain. After her coffee, Sarah opened her laptop and did something that felt important. She wrote an email to Pastor Mike. Pastor Mike, I wanted to share something that happened to me recently. For 9 months, I was unemployed and facing financial crisis. I spent those 9 months praying faithfully, attending every church event, and waiting for God to sovereignly provide. What I didn't do was apply for jobs, network, or take any practical action. I told myself I was trusting God, but really I was hiding behind spirituality because I was scared of rejection. This past week, I finally started applying for jobs, and within 48 hours, I had 2 job offers. I share this because I think sometimes our teaching about waiting on God can accidentally encourage passivity. I'm not saying don't pray or don't trust God. I'm saying maybe we should also teach people that God gave them brains, skills, and resources, and He expects them to use those things while they pray. Maybe faith without works really is dead, like James says. Just something I've been thinking about. Thanks for all you do. Sarah Mitchell. She read the email twice, then hit send. She didn't know if Pastor Mike would read it. She didn't know if it would change anything. But she'd said what needed to be said. Sunday morning, Sarah and Emma went to church. Sarah hadn't been in a week. She'd been too ashamed to show her face after asking for benevolence funds repeatedly. But today she walked in with her head held high. Not because she'd succeeded. Not because everything was perfect. But because she'd learned something valuable, and she wasn't going to hide from it. Jessica spotted her immediately and rushed over. Sarah, oh my gosh, tell me everything. Sarah told her about the job offers, Karen's help, the payment, the canceled eviction. Jessica had tears in her eyes by the end. I'm so proud of you. So proud. I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah said. You were the only person who told me the truth instead of enabling my delusion. That's what friends do, Jessica said, even when it's hard. During the worship service, they sang a song about God's faithfulness, about His provision, about trusting Him in the storm. Sarah sang the words, but she heard them differently now. God's faithfulness didn't mean He'd do everything for her. His provision didn't mean money would magically appear. Trusting Him didn't mean doing nothing. It meant trusting that He'd given her everything she needed, and then using what He'd given her. After the service, several people approached Sarah to ask how she was doing. She was honest with all of them. I'm doing better. I got a job. I start next week. Things were really bad for a while, because I made some poor choices, but I'm getting back on track. No one asked for details. Most people just said they were glad she was okay and they'd been praying for her. Sarah thanked them sincerely, because their prayers weren't bad. Prayer wasn't the problem. The problem had been thinking prayer was enough all by itself. After church, Sarah asked Jessica if they could grab coffee. They sat at a small cafe near the church, Emma occupied with a hot chocolate and a coloring book at the next table. I need to tell you something, Sarah said, and I need you to tell me if I'm crazy. Okay, Jessica said, leaning forward. I think the church, not just our church, but church culture in general, teaches a version of faith that can actually be harmful, Sarah began. All this language about waiting on God and not leaning on your own understanding and letting go and letting God, it sounds spiritual, but for people like me, it becomes an excuse to do nothing. Jessica nodded slowly. Keep going. And I think, Sarah continued, that a lot of us use spirituality as a shield against taking responsibility for our lives. We blame everything on spiritual warfare or God's timing, when really we're just scared or lazy or both. You're not crazy, Jessica said firmly. You're exactly right. I've thought this for years, but it's hard to say out loud because you get accused of not having enough faith. But that's the thing. Sarah leaned forward, passionate now. Real faith isn't passivity. Real faith is trusting God while you work. It's believing He'll guide you while you take steps forward. It's not sitting around waiting for Him to do everything. Exactly, Jessica agreed. Faith without works is dead. James wrote that for a reason. Sarah sat back. I wasted 9 months of my life because no one ever taught me that distinction. Everyone just kept telling me to trust God more, pray harder, wait longer. No one said, hey, maybe also apply for some jobs while you're praying. Well, Jessica said gently, I did try to tell you that. Sarah laughed. You did. And I didn't listen because I thought you didn't have enough faith. How messed up is that? Pretty messed up, Jessica agreed. But you learned. That's what matters. Sarah looked at Emma, coloring peacefully. I don't want her to learn faith the way I learned it. I want her to know that God gave her a brain and expects her to use it. That prayer and action work together, not against each other. Then teach her that, Jessica said. And maybe, when you're ready, share your story with other people who might be making the same mistake you made. Sarah thought about that. Maybe she would. Maybe her 9 months of foolishness could help someone else avoid the same trap. Maybe that was the redemption in all of this. Don't scroll past this like it didn't expose something. Like the video, subscribe to this channel so it reaches someone hiding behind faith instead of action. The story only gets more interesting from here. Monday morning, Sarah woke up at 6 a.m. with her alarm for the first time in 9 months. She got dressed in professional clothes. She made Emma breakfast. She packed her lunch. She checked her appearance in the mirror one last time. She looked like someone who had a job, someone who had a purpose, someone who wasn't waiting for God to do everything for her. Emma gave her a high five before school. Good luck on your first day, Mom. Thanks, baby. I'll pick you up right after work. Sarah arrived at Bright Smiles Dental at 8:45, 15 minutes early. Dr. Chun greeted her warmly and introduced her to the staff. 3 dental hygienists, 2 dentists who work part-time, and a dental assistant named Maria. The outgoing office manager, Linda, spent the entire day training Sarah. The systems were complex. The scheduling software was different from what she'd used before. The insurance verification process was tedious. There were patient charts to maintain, supply orders to manage, billing to process. It was overwhelming. By lunch, Sarah's head was spinning with information. By 3 p.m., she'd made her first mistake, double booking a patient because she clicked the wrong button. Linda caught it and fixed it with a smile. Don't worry. Everyone does that their first week. You'll get the hang of it. By 5 p.m., when Sarah finally clocked out, she was exhausted. But it was a different kind of exhaustion than she'd felt over the past 9 months. This was the exhaustion of accomplishment, of earning, of contributing. This was the exhaustion of someone who'd worked, not someone who'd wasted a day. As Sarah drove to pick up Emma, she realized something profound. Work wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, purpose, the satisfaction of knowing you'd done something useful with your day. 9 months of unemployment hadn't just cost her financially. It had cost her emotionally and spiritually. It had eroded her sense of self-worth because, deep down, humans are designed to create, contribute, and work. God didn't make humans to be passive recipients of blessings. He made them to be co-laborers with Him. Sarah had forgotten that, but she was remembering now. On Wednesday evening, after Emma was in bed, Sarah checked her email and saw a response from Pastor Mike. Her heart raced as she opened it. Sarah, thank you for your honest email. I've been thinking about what you said for the past few days, and I want you to know that your words deeply impacted me. You're right. I've been preaching wait on God without also teaching work while you wait. I've been emphasizing faith without equally emphasizing the works that should accompany it. I think I, and many pastors like me, have overcorrected against the secular world's emphasis on self-reliance. And in doing so, we've created a culture where spiritual passivity masquerades as deep faith. This Sunday, I'm going to preach on James 2, and I'm going to tell your story, with your permission, of course. I think our congregation needs to hear it. Would you be willing to share your testimony during the service? I understand if you're not ready, but I believe your experience could help others avoid the same trap. Grace and peace, Pastor Mike. Sarah read the email 3 times. He wanted her to share her testimony in front of the entire church about how she'd spent 9 months spiritually diluted and nearly lost everything because of it. The old Sarah would have declined. The old Sarah would have been too embarrassed, too concerned about her reputation, too worried about what people would think. But the new Sarah, the Sarah who'd learned that honesty was more valuable than image, typed a response. Pastor Mike, yes, I'll share my testimony. If my mistake can help even one person avoid making the same one, it's worth the embarrassment. Thank you for being willing to address this. Sarah. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Sunday morning arrived faster than Sarah expected. She sat in the third row with Emma, her hands sweating, her stomach in knots. Jessica sat beside her, squeezing her hand supportively. Pastor Mike's sermon on James chapter 2 was powerful. He talked about how faith without works is dead, how belief that doesn't produce action is meaningless, how God expects his people to be doers, not just hearers. Then he said, today we're going to hear from someone in our congregation who learned this lesson the hard way. Sarah Mitchell is going to share her story. It's not an easy story. It's not comfortable, but it's true, and I believe it's what many of us need to hear. Sarah, would you come up? Sarah stood, her legs shaking. Emma gave her an encouraging nod. She walked to the front of the church, stood behind the podium, and looked out at the congregation. Hundreds of faces. Some she knew well, others she'd only seen in passing. She took a breath and began. 9 months ago, I lost my job. It wasn't my fault. The company merged and my position was eliminated. I was devastated. I prayed about it. I asked God to provide. And then, I waited. For 9 months, I waited for God to hand me a job. I went to every prayer meeting. I quoted every scripture about provision. I had so much faith that God would come through. But I never applied for a single job. I never updated my resume. I never networked with former colleagues. I told myself I was trusting God, but really I was just scared. Scared of rejection. Scared of failure. Scared of putting myself out there and hearing no. It was easier to call it faith than to admit I was afraid. She paused, looking directly at the congregation. 2 weeks ago, I received an eviction notice. 7 days to come up with $3,000 or lose my home. My daughter and I were about to be homeless because I'd spent 9 months praying instead of working. And you know what happened when I finally started applying for jobs? Within 48 hours, I had 2 job offers. 48 hours. After 9 months of nothing, action produced results in 2 days. She could see people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Good. They should be uncomfortable. I'm not saying prayer is wrong. I'm not saying faith is bad. I'm saying that prayer without action is just wishful thinking. Faith without works is dead. That's what James says, and I learned it the hard way. God gave me a brain. He gave me skills. He gave me the internet and job boards and connections. He gave me everything I needed to find work. But he wasn't going to force me to use those things. That was my responsibility. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I think sometimes, in Christian culture, we use spirituality as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for our lives. We blame spiritual warfare when we're really just undisciplined. We talk about God's timing when we're really just procrastinating. We say we're waiting on the Lord when we're really just paralyzed by fear. And then we wonder why God isn't answering our prayers, when the truth is He already answered. He already gave us what we need. We're just too spiritually proud to use it. The church was completely silent. If you're waiting for God to do something He's already equipped you to do yourself, please hear me. Stop waiting. Pray yes. Trust God absolutely. But also get up and take action. Apply for the job. Make the phone call. Send the email. Use the brain God gave you. Because faith without works isn't just dead, it's disobedient. Sarah stepped back from the podium. The silence continued for what felt like an eternity. Then someone started clapping. It was Jessica. Then someone else joined. And another. And another. Within seconds, half the congregation was applauding. Not politely, enthusiastically. But Sarah also noticed the other half. The ones sitting with arms crossed. The ones who looked offended. The ones who were shaking their heads. Good, Sarah thought. Let them be offended. The truth is supposed to be convicting. After the service, people approached Sarah in waves. A young woman in her 20s with tears streaming down her face. I've been unemployed for 6 months, and doing exactly what you described. Praying, but not applying. Thank you. I'm going home right now and updating my resume. A middle-aged man. I've been waiting for God to save my failing business for 2 years. I think he's been waiting for me to make some hard decisions. Thank you for saying what needed to be said. A mother with 3 kids. I've been asking God to fix my marriage while refusing to go to counseling because I thought counseling meant I didn't have enough faith. You just gave me permission to get help. But not everyone was grateful. An older woman pulled Sarah aside, her expression stern. I think your testimony was inappropriate. You're basically saying we shouldn't trust God. That's not what I'm saying at all, Sarah replied calmly. I'm saying we should trust God while also using the tools he's given us. It sounds like you're promoting self-reliance over faith, the woman insisted. Sarah took a breath. Ma'am, if your house catches on fire, do you just pray about it? Or do you call 911 while you're praying? The woman blinked. God gave us firefighters, Sarah continued. He gave us emergency services. Using them isn't a lack of faith, it's wisdom. The same applies to job hunting, financial planning, and every other area of life. Prayer and action aren't opposites. They're partners. The woman didn't look convinced, but she walked away without arguing further. Jessica appeared at Sarah's side. You did amazing. Seriously, that took guts. Some people are mad, Sarah said. Of course they are, Jessica replied. You challenged their entire theology of convenience. People don't like having their spiritual excuses taken away. But the ones who needed to hear it, they heard it. That's what matters. That evening, as Sarah and Emma ate dinner together, Emma asked a question that would reshape everything Sarah thought she understood. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, baby. Anything. Emma put down her fork. You said you prayed for 9 months and God didn't answer. But you also said God gave you a brain and skills and stuff. So, did God not answer? Or did he answer a long time ago? And you just didn't notice? Sarah froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Out of the mouths of babes. What do you mean? Sarah asked, though she already knew exactly what Emma meant. Well, Emma said, thinking carefully, when I pray for help with my homework, God doesn't magically make me know the answers. But he already gave me a teacher and a textbook and you to help me. So he already answered my prayer before I even prayed it. Right? Sarah set down her fork and looked at her 9-year-old daughter with a mixture of awe and conviction. Emma, that's exactly right. God answered my prayer for a job before I even lost my job. He'd already given me everything I needed, my education, my experience, my skills, the internet, people who could help me. I just didn't see it because I was waiting for a different kind of answer. Like a miracle? Emma asked. Yeah, like a miracle. I wanted God to do something spectacular. Something that would make everyone say, wow, God is so good. But God had already done something spectacular. He'd prepared me in advance with everything I needed. I just had to use it. Emma nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to eating her chicken nuggets. But Sarah sat there, stunned. Her 9-year-old daughter had just articulated what she'd been trying to understand for 2 weeks. God had answered her prayer before she'd even prayed it. He'd given her a brain. He'd given her skills. He'd given her connections. He'd given her opportunities. The answer had been there all along. She'd just been looking for the wrong kind of answer. 3 months passed. Sarah thrived at Bright Smiles Dental. She mastered the systems, built relationships with patients, and became an invaluable part of the team. Dr. Chin told her she was the best office manager they'd ever had. Sarah paid Karen back within 2 months, earlier than promised. She paid her mother back. She rebuilt her savings. She took Emma to the zoo and to the movies and bought her new shoes without having to pray about it first. But more than the financial stability, Sarah experienced something deeper: freedom. Freedom from the prison of spiritual passivity. Freedom from the fear disguised as faith. Freedom from the belief that God wanted her to do nothing while he did everything. She still prayed every day, but now her prayers were different. God, give me wisdom for this decision. God, open my eyes to the opportunities you've already placed in front of me. God, help me use the gifts you've given me effectively. She didn't pray for God to do things she was capable of doing herself. She prayed for guidance, strength, and wisdom while she worked. That was the partnership God had wanted all along. 6 months after her testimony, Sarah received an email from a woman named Tiffany. "Hi, Sarah. I heard your testimony at Cornerstone 6 months ago, and it changed my life. I've been unemployed for a year, waiting for God to provide, just like you were. After hearing your story, I spent 1 week applying for jobs intensively. I got 3 interviews and 2 offers. I start my new job next week. I want to say thank you for having the courage to share your story. You literally saved me from making the same mistake. Can I take you to coffee and hear more about your journey?" Tiffany. Sarah read the email with tears in her eyes. This was the redemption. This was the purpose in the pain. Her 9 months of foolishness had become someone else's wake-up call. She met Tiffany for coffee the following Saturday. Tiffany was 28, single, and looked exactly like Sarah had 6 months ago, tired, discouraged, but trying to appear spiritually strong. "I was so convinced that getting a job on my own was a lack of faith," Tiffany explained. "I thought if I just prayed harder, believed stronger, God would drop the perfect job into my lap. But after hearing your testimony, I realized I was using spirituality as a shield against my fear of rejection." "That's exactly what I did," Sarah said. "And it cost me 9 months of my life and nearly cost me my home. I can't believe how fast things turned around once I started actually applying," Tiffany said. "Like within 1 week, I had multiple options. It made me realize how much time I'd wasted." Sarah leaned forward. "Here's what I want you to understand, though. You didn't waste that time because God was punishing you or because you didn't have enough faith. You spent that time learning a crucial lesson. God is not a vending machine, and faith is not passivity. Now you know, and you'll never forget." Tiffany nodded. "I won't. I promise." "Good. Because the Christian world needs people like us, people who will tell the truth about this toxic theology of just wait on God and do nothing. We need to teach the next generation that faith and action are partners, not enemies." They talked for 2 hours. Sarah shared her entire journey. The eviction notice, the desperate applications, Karen's grace, Emma's question. When they parted ways, Tiffany hugged Sarah tightly. "Thank you. Seriously, you changed my life." As Sarah drove home, she realized something. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning, because now she had a mission. Over the next few months, Sarah started receiving more messages. People who'd heard her testimony through word of mouth. People who'd heard Pastor Mike reference it in other sermons. People who were struggling with the same spiritual delusion she'd escaped. Sarah started meeting with them one-on-one, helping them update resumes, walking them through job applications, giving them the tough love that Jessica had given her. Jessica joined her. Together, they started an unofficial ministry at the church called Faith and Action. Not a prayer group, not a Bible study, an actual practical ministry where they help people take concrete steps while also praying. Job search workshops, resume reviews, interview prep, financial planning, accountability groups. Pastor Mike supported it fully. He'd changed his preaching style too. Now he balanced every sermon about trusting God with practical steps about using the resources God had provided. The church began to shift. Not everyone liked it. Some people left, complaining that the church was becoming too worldly and not spiritual enough. But others flourished. Employment went up among church members. Financial stress decreased. People stopped enabling each other's spiritual passivity and started challenging each other to be wise stewards of their God-given abilities. Sarah's story became a case study, not just at Cornerstone, but at other churches who heard about what had happened. She was invited to speak at women's conferences, unemployment support groups, and even in a seminary about the dangers of spiritual bypassing. Her message was always the same. God has already answered many of your prayers by giving you the tools to solve your own problems. Use them. Exactly 1 year after receiving the eviction notice, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with her journal. She wrote, "A year ago today, I was staring at a red envelope that threatened to destroy my life. I was $47 away from homelessness. I was 9 months deep in spiritual delusion, convinced that doing nothing was the same as trusting God. Today, I have a job I love, a healthy savings account, a daughter who understands that faith includes action, and a purpose that emerged from my biggest failure. I learned that God is not a cosmic vending machine. He doesn't reward passivity. He partners with people who use the gifts He's given them. I learned that prayer is powerful, but prayer without action is just wishful thinking. I learned that sometimes the miracle we're waiting for is simply the courage to take the first step. I learned that God had already answered my prayer for provision. He'd given me a brain, skills, experience, and opportunities. I just had to stop waiting for Him to do what He'd equipped me to do myself. Most importantly, I learned that real faith isn't about getting God to do things for you. Real faith is about trusting God while you do the things He's called you to do. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains, not the kind that sits at the base of the mountain praying for it to move, but the kind that grabs a shovel and starts digging while asking God for strength. I wasted 9 months learning this lesson, but now I get to spend the rest of my life teaching it to others. And somehow, God has redeemed even my foolishness for His purposes. That's the real miracle. Sarah closed her journal and looked directly ahead, as if she could see through time and space to the person who needed to hear this story. Maybe that person is you. Maybe you've been waiting for God to do something He's already equipped you to do yourself. Maybe you've been calling it faith when it's really fear. Maybe you've been praying for breakthrough when what you really need is to take the first step. Here's what Sarah would tell you if she could. God has already answered your prayer. He's given you a brain. Use it. He's given you skills. Develop them. He's given you opportunities. Pursue them. He's given you connections. Leverage them. He's given you time. Don't waste it. Stop waiting for a miracle when God has already given you everything you need to create your own breakthrough. Pray yes. Trust God absolutely. Have faith always. But also get up off your knees and take action. Because faith without works is dead. And God is waiting for you to partner with Him, not just beg Him. Sarah is now the office manager at Bright Smiles Dental, making $45,000 a year after her first raise. She runs the Faith in Action ministry at Cornerstone Community Church and has helped over 50 people find employment in the past year. She's been asked to write a book about her experience. Emma is 10 years old, thriving in school, and has a healthy understanding of how prayer and action work together. She recently told her Sunday school teacher, God helps those who help themselves, but also those who can't help themselves. You have to know the difference. Jessica is still Sarah's best friend and co-leads the Faith and Action ministry. She's known at church as the friend who tells you the truth even when it hurts. Pastor Mike changed his preaching approach after Sarah's testimony. His sermons now balance spiritual truth with practical application. Church attendance dropped by 15%, but engagement and community impact increased by 40%. Karen, Sarah's former supervisor, became a close friend. They have lunch once a month. She told Sarah recently, "You're the best investment I ever made." Cornerstone Community Church now has a reputation in the Austin area as the church that helps you get stuff done. Their unemployment rate among members is the lowest of any church in the city. And the red eviction notice? Sarah kept it. It sits in a frame on her desk at work with a caption underneath. The day I stopped waiting and started working. This story is for everyone who's ever confused spiritual language with spiritual maturity. For everyone who's ever used prayer as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility. For everyone who's ever waited for God to do something they were perfectly capable of doing themselves. God is not a vending machine. Faith is not passivity. Prayer is not a substitute for action. Your brain is a gift from God. Use it. Your skills are a gift from God. Develop them. Your opportunities are a gift from God. Pursue them. And when you pray, don't just ask God to do everything for you. Ask Him for wisdom while you work. Ask Him for strength while you try. Ask Him for guidance while you move. Because that's what real faith looks like. Not waiting. Working. Not claiming. Creating. Not passivity. Partnership. God has already answered your prayer. Now it's your turn to take the next step. If this story resonated with you, do 3 things. 1. Stop waiting and start taking action today. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. 2. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's stuck in spiritual passivity. Someone who's confusing faith with fear. 3. Subscribe to Faith Chronicles for more stories that challenge comfortable Christianity and inspire practical faith. Because faith is not only lived, it is remembered, recorded, and retold. But more importantly, faith is demonstrated through action. Go demonstrate yours.